Well, good evening. How's everybody doing? My name is Lee Love, and I am a photographer, director, and educator here at Photo Mentor TV, which is where you're at tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. I do this every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Central, or 6 p.m. Pacific time, of course. We do this, you can reach us on YouTube at youtube.photomentor.tv, or on, if you're watching on Facebook, facebook.photomentor.tv is the other way to get there. Appreciate you joining us again. As I said before, be sure and leave your comments in the your questions in the comments section of either Facebook or YouTube. I seem to be, I don't know why, but you know, connecting the live questions with Facebook seems to be troublesome for me. It works perfectly for YouTube. I don't know why, what's going on with Facebook, but anyway, that's the deal. Either I can still watch and answer your questions if you put them on the screen, if you leave them in the comment section. So no big deal. Let's see. So the question a lot of people ask me is, why do we do this? And the reason is frustration, actually. I got frustrated seeing people that were, you know, giving the wrong answers in these groups and forums. So it just, or, you know, repeating information that they've read, but it's not actually accurate because they've never done it. I call that head knowledge, not heart knowledge. Anyway, and so I just felt there was a need to help new photographers out there and give you guys the right information and put you on the right path. And so that's the reason for doing Photo Mentor TV. If you are not watching live and you're watching the replay and you can also submit questions if you want to help@photomentor.tv, and I'll be glad to answer those either directly or add them to the show next week if you want. So either way. Let's see here. What else we got? Oh, if you appreciate what we're doing here, I would appreciate it if you would like the Facebook page and, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel. So that would be a terrific. And the other thing is, share this. I mean, that's the other great thing is, you know, we want to, all boats rise with the tide, so we want to make sure everybody gets the information, become a better photographer, and to get more enjoyment out of photography. So that's so if you share this these videos or the channel or whatever with other people, I'd certainly appreciate it. I should also let you know that once a month, I also do a photo review. It's the first Friday of the month, so the next one will be, I guess, April 2nd. And they're anonymous, and so anybody can submit photos if you'd like. It doesn't matter how much experience you have or what kind of camera you're using, even if it's a smartphone. The goal is to look at your work and not review it on whether, you know, the problem I see with a lot of these things, people ask for creative comments or creative criticism, constructive criticism in these groups and forums. But the problem is that's all based on subjective, you know, personal opinion. Oh, I like this, I don't like that, you should do this. And so they're all over the map. That's not what these reviews are about. These reviews are not subjective. They're really looking more at composition, the technical merit, how they're executed technically, and the subject or the story. And, you know, I may make some comments about whether I like or don't like, but the point is I try to look at everything evenly and the same. Doesn't matter how long you've been shooting or what the subject is, or whether it's something that I really like as a subject matter, but it's whether you communicated that message and it came across well in the photograph. You can go to review.photomentor.tv if you want to upload your photos, and we're glad to do that. I asked a couple questions about your, I want to know how long you've been shooting, of course, and because that gives me an idea of how to look at the photos. If you're just starting out, then I'm not going to be too, not that I would be hard anyway, but I'm not going to give you the same kind of pointers that I would if someone's been shooting for 4 or 5 years. So anyway, that's the deal there. So again, first Friday of the month, submit your photos. You can submit them anytime, of course, and I'll be glad to add those to the photo review. That would be terrific. Also, if you are in the social media circles, you can also get more information and watch what's going on by following me on Facebook, Instagram, of course, YouTube, or Twitter, all of those, and I try and keep up on those things. And if there's news or information or things that are going on both with what we're doing here or in the industry, then I'll try and provide that to you on an ongoing basis. Okay, I think that's about it. So before we get to the questions, a couple of weeks ago I introduced a concept of what I call the undeveloped photographer. And if you didn't see that, it'd be worth going back and watching. But the idea is that there's 3 stages or pillars, if you want to call them that I believe that a photographer goes through, especially a new photographer. The first one is, of course, confidence. Lack of confidence, trying to build your confidence up, afraid to take certain shoots or afraid to shoot certain things. It's natural. It's not a criticism, it's just an observation. And I talked about that 2 weeks ago. Last week, of course, we were doing photo reviews, but I believe it was 2 weeks ago that I expanded a little more on this confidence and what it takes to do that and how to gain more confidence. The second pillar in the column is in the undeveloped photographer is being really overwhelmed. There's just so much to learn. A lot of it's technical for some people, and so just getting to take acceptable pictures or pictures that are either sharp or not overexposed or things like that can really overwhelm somebody, a new photographer especially. And then the third area is direction or lack of direction in what you're trying to photograph. So tonight I'm just going to touch briefly on the overwhelm part, and then we'll get into some questions. The problem with being overwhelmed for the most part is that it's like drinking from a fire hose. And when you go into these groups and forums, I find that the information they give you is not very helpful. It's number one, it's all over the place. Number two, they're not really asking you or where you are or the kind of photography you're doing or what equipment you have. They're just kind of throwing out advice there to see what sticks or to make themselves feel important. I'm not quite sure why, but so it's overwhelming as a new photographer to try and understand how to get started, how to become successful in the sense of just making some images that you're proud of. They don't have to be great, but just something that you feel like you're progressing with. And so I would say that the biggest area is technology. And this is where I differ from a lot of other people, where they will tell you, oh, you got to get off of auto, you have to start shooting on manual. Now, don't get me wrong, there's certainly a place to do that, and there's a reason to do that, and there's a stage in your development where you want to be able to understand the exposure triangle and move off of auto. But my approach is a little different in that I prefer you stay on auto as long as you can, or as long as you need to, is probably more accurate, in order to gain some confidence, in order to start understanding the technology. So here's my point. When we were in the days of film, everything was manual, right? We were shooting manual cameras, manual focus, there was no automatic per se. So you had to learn the exposure triangle. You had to understand aperture, shutter speed, and what then was called ASA of the film. Now we refer to it as ISO. You had to understand how those related to be able to make even just a reasonable image. So it wasn't all black or it wasn't all washed out. But nowadays that's not necessary because the cameras are so smart. They can do a lot of the work for you. So my approach is to help you help my students not get overwhelmed is to start shooting on auto to get going, and to focus more on the subject, focus more on scene, focus more on telling a story, because that's really where the most important thing is. It's not about the perfect picture, it's not about the sharpest picture, while you don't want your pictures to be out of focus, of course, but it's more about being able to see the light, see the subject, interact with your subject, and really create emotion or capture emotion in that photo. Now, I've used this analogy before, if you listen, I think a couple weeks ago, and that is that you can take a perfect picture of an apple, perfectly lit, super sharp, but it's just an apple, okay? But if you take that apple, you slice it open, you put some cheese next to it, a knife, you dress it, you stylize it, now you're starting to tell a story. That doesn't have anything to do, for the most part, with technology. It doesn't matter what lens you're using, doesn't matter what camera you're using. It really has to do more with seeing and being able to convey the emotion or the story in that picture. And so that's what I mean by trying to learn that first, as opposed to being overwhelmed by the technology. Because what I see happen is a lot of people will get discouraged or frustrated because they're focused so much on trying to learn aperture and shutter speed and all this stuff in this camera, which comes with a manual that's this thick, and they get discouraged. And so what I'm trying to do is help you get over that hump, start taking some pictures that you're proud of, that you can do on any camera, and then we can move into the more technology and move into learning the exposure triangle and some of those types of things. But it's not necessary to shoot on manual to get a great photo. And here's my example of why that is. If you shoot a photo that's properly exposed and it's at f8 at, I don't know, 1/25 of a second at ISO 200, let's say, it doesn't matter if the camera made that decision or you dialed that in directly in manual. The exposure is exactly the same. It's going to look exactly the same. You're not going to be able to tell a difference. So it's not about shooting on manual or whether you're shooting on auto, or I like aperture priority would typically be my recommendation, but to get started, it doesn't really matter. That's going to be more important to your growth as a photographer and your growth as an artist than starting off on manual. So anyway, I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but that's something that really bothers me as I see this advice over and over. Now, and again, sometimes I shoot on manual, sometimes I shoot on aperture priority, and even occasionally, once in a great while, I'll shoot on auto, but not very often. But the point is, I want to have control of that camera, but I don't want to have to fiddle with the camera. So what happens is I see some people, they're going out, they're photographing their friends, or maybe they get a small job to do portraits, and they're so busy messing with the camera and getting it to right on manual, figuring out why it's overexposed, underexposed, or whatever, that they're not engaging the subject, and therefore they don't get a very good image, because the person is now looking at you dealing with this camera and not dealing with them and not trying to get a compelling image. The other mistake they make is, oh, I'll just fix it in Photoshop. So they think when they get it in, even though it's underexposed or overexposed, I can just correct it because I'm shooting raw. That's the wrong approach, absolutely the wrong approach, and we'll talk about that some other time. So anyway, being overwhelmed is a big part of being a new photographer. And so if you are overwhelmed, I recommend you let the camera do some of the work for you and then grow into using these other modes. I don't care if you actually use it. That's the great thing about an iPhone or a smartphone, is that the phone takes care of all of the technical stuff. So you can just focus on the photo and composing and looking at the light. So the phone, I think, is a great tool to learn composition, because you're not messing with these settings. And I encourage people to use the phone as a teaching tool. All right, so enough on that. Let's see here. See if we got any. Let me make sure before we move on if we got any questions here. Okay. So our first question for tonight is from Kayla, and she says, I've been doing product photography and wanted your advice on whether I could use these to market my photography. So the issue that she was discussing was the client was using the images for social media and things like that, which is what, the agreement was. That's why she licensed them for. But she was not sure whether she could use the images. So here's the deal, Kayla. When you push that shutter, you are creating a copyright. Now, I'm not an attorney, okay? I don't propose to be one, but I've been doing this a long time. And when you push that shutter, that photo belongs to you. You own the copyright of that photo. So it doesn't matter if you license or let her or sell the image. If you don't want to call sell the image because that's misleading. But you produce the image and then they pay you to produce that image and you give them a copy of the image to use for social media or marketing or whatever. That does not that does not mean you're transferring the copyright to them. It just means you're letting them use those images for the purposes that you define. You still have complete copyright of those images, and you can use them for almost anything you want. Now, there's so for marketing especially, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to put them on your website. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to put them in social media, watermark them, whatever you want to do to show the kind of work that, as a sample of the work that you're able to do. Now, that's kind of the legal aspect. Now, there's a business aspect, which is a little different. So I'm a commercial photographer, so I deal with a lot of corporations and B2B kind of stuff, business to business. And so in those situations, it's more of a relationship issue where, let's say I'm photographing a new product and they haven't released it yet. Well, then I can't go and take that. I mean, it would be, they could sue me if I guess they wanted to. But the point is, part of the agreement is I would not release these images until they've released them or some time period after that. So that's a different issue. That's, again, a business issue, not necessarily a legal issue. So if you're concerned about it, though, you can just let them know in your agreement that, that in your, I've just put it in my estimate, I have a page in the estimate when I give them the pricing, just a page of kind of things that are the agreement, the scope of work, and how things are going to work, and you can put that in there. And let them know that these are your images, you're going to be using them for marketing. And they should be flattered, actually, if you think the work is that great, that you're going to use it to promote yourself and you're going to use their product to do it. That's actually a bonus for them. So I don't know why they would why they'd have a problem with it. There's one other thing, though, you should be aware of, and this is not something you ask about, but something you should really take into consideration. And that is, in your agreement, you want to make sure that you clearly state what the images are going to be used for by them. So if they're going to use them for marketing, printing, promotion, social media, lay that out. The biggest mistake or the problem that I see happen quite frequently is that you will provide the client with images, and then the client thinks they can take those images and give them away to somebody else. It's a big problem in the construction or the architectural or the remodeling business, because what happens, I've seen, you'll go in, maybe they're doing this remodeling or a building or whatever, they'll hire you to photograph it, and then the people that put in the flooring or the lighting or some other part of the construction loves the pictures and, oh, these are great, can I get a copy? And of course the person the client, the architect, let's say, will make it up. Oh yeah, sure, no problem. And they'll give, because they want to help the relationship with this supplier, they'll give them the images and you let them use them. That is not acceptable. You cannot allow your client to do that. The way you're pricing your images are for that client and for the uses you've agreed on. The agreement does not allow them to distribute. In my agreement, I say you're not allowed to distribute, give away, sell as stock photo, or in any way transfer rights of these photos to anyone else, even if the company was sold, for example, without written permission from me. So here's an analogy. Let's say that, well, there's two analogies. One, you buy a song on iTunes, right? 99 cents. Great. You get the song. It's terrific. You listen to it. Now you're going to do an independent film. You can't take that same song you bought for 99 cents and put it in a movie. That's a completely different licensing agreement. It's the same thing when you shoot photos for a client. Like I said, you're working an agreement with them. They didn't come to you and say, oh, by the way, we want to be able to distribute them to 10 companies. They're going to use them in their marketing material. They're going to put them in a catalog. No, no, no. That's a completely different pricing model, and you want to be able to protect yourself there. So the way it should work is if the lighting company wants to use your images, or whoever, then they should come to you and negotiate a price separately than the original pricing. Okay? So that's just the way it works. Think about if you did your product photography and then the client went to Nike or something and said, oh yeah, or whatever, some large Coca-Cola, said, oh yeah, you can use them. Now, next thing you know, is in a national ad campaign. That is not the agreement you came out with, and that is not where they're able to use it. So they cannot just take and copy and give those images away, just like you can't take a movie you downloaded and give it away, or a song or anything else. So anyway, if you have any questions on this, let me know. I have an intellectual property attorney I can turn you on to, and his name's Gordon Firemark, and he's got some great stuff, and he'd be glad to. I'm going to have him on this one. I'm going to do some interviews with him. But anyway, I can give you his information, and you can reach out to him and talk to him about it. But anyway, that's the deal on that. So be careful about that. It's your work. It's copyrighted. You protect it. Otherwise, you're giving money away if you're not protecting your images for doing that. Okay. All right. So the next one is from Tara Lynn, and she says, "What do you recommend for collecting payments that are not too expensive?" Well, they're not expensive until you start making a lot of money, and then they go up, of course, Tara Lynn. So the deal is, I guess it's Terry Lynn. So generally, PayPal, Stripe, most of these companies take anywhere from 2.8 to 3%, roughly right around there, and some of them will charge like plus 30 cents per transaction. It's not a lot of money until you start doing a lot of work, and then you're getting into the thousands, and then it eats away into your margin. So the more revenue you generate through them, the more negotiating you have, you can go to them and then negotiate a better rate. But it is a problem, and it is something that you just have to deal with. I don't know how else to tell you what are their suggestions. There's not anybody that's going to give you 1% transaction fees. Some people say you can do Venmo and things like that are free. But here's the problem. You want to use whatever you use, you want to use it standard that these companies or these people are used to using. So if you come up and go, oh, I am using Bob's payment system because it's 0.5%, but they don't have access to Bob's payment system, then it's a barrier to you doing business. So you want to make sure it's as easy as possible to make them submit a payment and trouble-free, and it's no big deal. Now, it's my understanding that some places like PayPal and things like that, if you've advertised that, if you pay by PayPal, it's a 3% add-on, I think that's against their terms of condition. So you got to be careful about that. But that could be something you could do if you wanted to. You could call it a handling fee or some other fee that goes on with that if they pay by certain systems, credit card or whatever. So you got to, but I would definitely check with your payment system, because like I said, they do have some rules in place that they don't allow you to do that, or you certainly can't advertise that you're doing it. So anyway, check with that and make sure it's allowable. Okay. So Katie says, I'd like to add hair and makeup to my sessions. Great idea, Katie. Do you recommend clients go to their own salon, or how does this work? So first of all, I would tell you that if you can get hair and makeup on your shoots, absolutely do it. I love working with hair and makeup artists. They make your work look so much better. And so if you can do that, fine. If they go to their own hairstylist and makeup artist, that's fine. The problem is I prefer to have my own. And here's why. Number one, once you build a relationship with a good makeup artist, they know what you're kind of expecting. The second thing is they're used to working with photographers, hopefully. And that's what I'm saying, that's where you build the relationship. And so they know photography is different than just getting your hair and makeup done in a salon. Typically, now look, I don't know much about makeup, obviously. I tell people this is a face for podcasting, but the point is that a really good makeup artist that's used to working with photographers knows how to do makeup for photography, and it's different. It's typically a little overdone. It's a little more than you would do in a salon because it doesn't show up as much in a camera, depending on how you're doing it. And if you're going for a certain look, you may want to be able to instruct the makeup artist, hey, I'm going for this dark, maybe cinematic look, or I'm going for this light, airy look. And if they're good, they'll be able to translate that into the right kind of makeup. The second thing I like about about using a makeup artist is it saves you so much work because you will not have to do nearly as much retouching if the makeup artist is good, which I'm sure they would be, and you don't have to go in and do a lot of Photoshop work. So that's the second thing. Also, you should use that as a bonus or a plus when you talk to your clients. So look, I've got a makeup artist. I highly recommend her or him. I've used them before. They're excellent, and here's why I recommend we do this. It's going to cost a little extra, but it will actually save you in the long run because now I'm not having to charge you for doing as much retouching. Because think about it. If you can get a makeup artist on set to do the makeup, and it means you don't have to spend a week editing the photos, number one, you're going to make more money, depending on how you're charging your client. Number two, if you're charging the client, which you should be, by the way, for doing post-production, then it's going to cost, they're going to save money. So that's the second reason I totally recommend doing a makeup artist. And there's a third reason. It's kind of an intangible reason, but frankly, it makes the client feel important because, you're fussing over them. You're spending extra time and attention. It's a whole experience. I keep trying to explain this to people that when you're dealing with people that come to you for photography, it's a big deal. It's not like it's just, oh, we're just going to have my photo taken. Most of the time, these are people that do not have their photo taken. They're not comfortable in front of the camera. And so by having a makeup artist and making them feel good about themselves means you're going to get better images, better emotion out of them, and they're going to enjoy the experience more. So I highly recommend using a makeup artist as part of your proposal whenever possible. It's just a great way to go. So I could go on and on about that, but I definitely think it's something you should consider. Okay. Again, let's go. Just kind of reminder, as I mentioned before, if you don't know, we do have a Photo Mentor Facebook group. If you're interested in joining now, it's a little different than most of the groups that we have that you see. It's relatively small on purpose because I want you to get individual attention. You're never going to see anybody post a link to YouTube and say, oh, here, or read the manual, or in any way demean you or put you down. That's not allowed at all. It's really meant to be an education, a place for education, and I really am encouraging new photographers to join this group. If you are someone that, I don't know how to say this nicely, so if you think you know it all or you want to go and show off and you want to, be braggadocious and put people down, then don't bother, because you won't last more than 5 minutes in this group. That is not this purpose. I'm also posting more education material in there. Right now, I think I've got I took a segment of our workshop I did for Lightroom, and it's in there on how to do watermarks. So anyway, if you're interested, go to photomentor.tv/join. The reason you go to here is because a couple of questions I need you to fill out. Make sure you're legit. I mean, I got one just the other day from someone that had been on Facebook like 2 days and didn't have any posts, and it was obviously spam. So this helps filter that out. So anyway. So, if you're interested, go ahead, and we'd love to have you join us in the Facebook group if that's the kind of thing you're interested in. Okay. Amy says, I'm thinking of upgrading from a Nikon D5600 either to a D750 or a Nikon Z6 mirrorless. Both of those, Amy, are excellent choices. I would give you a couple of, the first thing I would tell you is, the first thing I'd ask is, what is the 5600 not doing for you? Now, you may just want to upgrade, maybe you want to go to full frame. There could be a lot of reasons, but without asking you, so there, it could be a legitimate reason. I see a lot of people, though, that just upgrade because they think they need to. And as someone who has done this many times, spent way more money on way more gear than I should, and realized my work still sucks, then you realize, oh gosh, I spent all this money and now my images haven't improved. They may improve technically a little bit because a D750 or a Z6 is a little better camera, but that's not going to help the images themselves. So here's my answer to you. First of all, you can't buy one of these cameras, or any camera in my opinion, over the internet. You need to go somewhere, drive, find a local camera store, whatever it may be, and get your hands on these things. You got to touch them, you got to feel them. A camera is an extension of yourself. If it doesn't feel right in your hand, or the menus don't work the way you think they should, or the controls aren't where you think they should be, it's going to be very, very annoying, and you're not going to be happy at all. Now, the nice thing about going from a 5600 to the 750 or even the Z6, I've noticed, is the nice thing is it still feels like a Nikon. I don't know how to describe that to you, other than when I picked up the Z6, I was like, well, this just felt familiar to me. It was not foreign, even though it was mirrorless. It still felt like a Nikon. So I don't know if it's the depth of the grip they've done or something like that. The menus operate exactly the same. They're almost identical. Obviously, there's more things in there, but so that was helpful. But you won't know that until you actually look at it and try it yourself. The 750, there's also, there's now a 780, a D780, which is sort of replacing the 750. 750 is a workhorse. It's a great camera. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just terrific camera. But depending on the pricing and your budget, you might want to look at the 780 as well. They've added some things to it, backlit sensor and some stuff like that. A little better, lower noise, a high ISO performance. But the Z6 is phenomenal as well. So you can't go wrong really with any of these cameras nowadays. There are no bad cameras, just bad photographers. So hopefully that'll help. But try and get your hands on one. You can rent one if there's not anybody nearby. There's a couple places borrow lenses, and one place I think called Lens Rental. And, they're relatively inexpensive. Rent them for a week, play with them, see what you think. That'll make a big difference. Okay. So, Sierra says, I think that's right. I hope that's right, Sierra. But I photograph people. Oh, okay. Sorry. I think I messed up the question here. She was asking about a tripod. Someone gave her a tripod as a gift, and she was questioning whether, because she does portrait photography, is this really something she could use? And the general consensus was no. Well, that's not true. That's absolutely not true. Yes, you can use a tripod for photographing people, portraiture, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why you should do this. Now, first let me back up and say, it's not always convenient, I admit that, and you don't always want to use a tripod when photographing people, but there are some reasons you do want to use a tripod. The first one is your images will always be sharper. Now, I know people go, well, that doesn't make sense. I can hold the camera pretty steady, or I'm shooting at a high shutter speed. It doesn't matter. You can take any camera and put it on in the middle of the range, f8, let's say, and handheld on a tripod, or handheld and shoot, and on a tripod and shoot, and you zoom in and you look at those images, the tripod image will be sharper. There's just no doubt about it. You can take a kit lens, a basic lens, shoot it in the middle range, and like I said, f8, f11 on a tripod, and you'd be shocked at how sharp the images will be versus handheld on a $2,000 lens. And the reason is this. So if you have you see me use this analogy before. If you have a laser and there's any movement whatsoever, there may be, you may not see it, but the further away you get from the movement will be even greater. Well, it's the same thing on when you're using a tripod or not using a tripod. It's just even if you're shooting at 4,000th of a second, it's impossible to hold that camera perfectly still. Now, it may be sharp, you may not see it when you're shooting it that high, but a tripod will always be sharper. The second reason, though, is this, and this is even, I think, more important. When you're photographing people, remember, most people are not used to being in front of a camera. So what I've noticed is that, and so when I used to, let me back up, when I used to shoot film and I was shooting medium format, one of the cameras I had was a waist level camera, waist level viewfinder. It was a medium format. And so instead of looking through the camera, you look down, and you could see, and there was a mirror in there, and it went out this way. So you never brought the camera up to your face because you were looking down. Hasselblad had this, Mamiya had this type of thing. So the great thing about that is I'm always looking at the subject. So I'm looking at you, I'm okay, hey, that looks great, turn your head a little bit that way, okay, boom, shoot, 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 okay? So I'm never doing this. What I've noticed is that people, as soon as you take that camera and you bring it up in front of your eye, their facial expressions change. They go into some kind of mode. They get nervous or whatever, or they'll do the pose, you know. And so you don't get as, I don't think, as great an images when you're dealing with people that aren't used in front of the camera. So by putting the camera on a tripod, and I've done this many times, and I'll use especially if I'm photographing a lot of people, like corporate headshots or things like that, and a remote shutter release, I can now, and it's set up, it's relatively loose. I mean, I know I'm going to check it. I know they're not going to be out of frame. But now I'm talking to them, and I'm engaging them, and I'm asking them questions about their job, or, oh, how long you been with the company? Okay, boom, fire. You know, what do you do for the company? Okay, and that's great. Turn your head just a little bit. Okay, boom, fire. So my point is, I'm now engaging the subject. I'm not focusing or worrying about the equipment. It's that whole thing I talked about earlier in the Undeveloped Photographer and being overwhelmed, where if I'm not worrying about the equipment and the technology, I'm now zeroed in and laser focused on my subject. That is how you're going to get the best images. So by shooting on a tripod, you can do that. You can again, get a remote shutter release. You can talk to them. You can engage them. You can get them relaxed, and you're just firing away. Now, if you're in available light, especially outdoors or whatever, or even constant lighting, they're not even going to really know when you're shooting, per se. I mean, you can be firing away. Oh, that's good. Turn your head. Oh, that's good. That's good. And so you can just be shooting away, looking, and you're looking for those micro expressions. I don't know about you guys, but I know that I've had many images that I've taken. One looks like this, and one looks like this, and one of them is just a small movement with their eyes or their face or whatever, smile, and it's so much better than the other one. Well, that's what you get when you're not doing this, when you're not putting the camera up to your face. And that also creates a barrier, I believe, a psychological barrier between you and your subject. Now, I photograph people. That's my specialty. I love working with people. And so, for me, being able to be able to shoot without the camera being in the way is a big bonus. So anyway, Sarah, there definitely a way to use a tripod. Yes, you can use a tripod to shoot people, photograph people. Don't listen to what people tell you about. No, you can't do it. They don't know what they're talking about. And there's a place and a time to be able to do that. And it can really maybe be a benefit to you. If you're doing this as a business, it might give you an edge that maybe some people aren't doing. So anyway, hope that helps. Let's see here. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. So let's keep going. So the next question is from Sherry, and Sherry says, I was considering going to a mirrorless camera. I think there's supposed to be some more there. Boy, I just really did not do a good job tonight, on these questions. I think I'll see. Let me look at this. I was considering going to a mirrorless camera. Okay. I think she was asking, what should she do that or go to a DSLR? It really doesn't matter. It's the same kind of question again, same kind of answer again, in that you want to be able to try the camera first and see what you think about it. Now, here's something that a lot of people won't tell you about. I see this over and over in these groups. Someone asks the same question, and they'll be going, oh, you got to go to a Z6, Z7, Sony, whatever. What they won't tell you, though, is there's a difference in the way the cameras operate. They're both going to be good cameras, and you're going to get great images. But, for example, I shoot both. I have mirrorless and I have DSLR. But for me, I prefer the DSLR because I photograph people. It's the same kind of thing I was talking about before. Sorry about that. Is that I want to be able to see their eyes. Where a mirrorless camera, you're looking at a computer screen, you're looking at a TV monitor in the back of that camera. You're not looking at an optical image. So when on a DSLR, when I go from here to here, I'm looking at exactly the same picture, exactly the same image. I can look at their eyes. Their eyes are going to be the same whether I'm holding the camera in front of my eye or not. And so I really prefer that. You don't get that with a mirrorless camera because now you're looking at a TV monitor, sometimes a little bit of delay, or it's not exactly the same image. So now the other thing is the battery life on a mirrorless camera is less than a DSLR because, again, you got a viewfinder there that's on all the time. And they're getting better, but still. And also the resolution of that monitor is not going to be as good as if it's an optical. So anyway, I'm not trying to trash mirrorless cameras. There's certainly a reason for mirrorless cameras and a place for them. But a lot of people won't tell you some of this stuff. They'll just go, oh, DSLRs are dead, mirrorless cameras are the way to go. Well, if that was the case, nobody would be shooting film, which is on the rise, by the way. And nobody would be buying film cameras and shooting, one medium format or 120 film, which I see all the time now. I was talking to a wedding photographer just recently, and she travels all over the country doing destination weddings on film because that's unique and her clientele wants that. So anyway, mirrorless cameras are not going to kill DSLRs, just like the TV didn't kill radio. It just changed the market some. So anyway, so there's my comment on mirrorless cameras. So try them out, look at them, hold them, shoot with them before you make a decision. It's not something you can do by buying one over the internet and just because of a bunch of recommendations or a spec sheet. Okay, so Brandy asked, I shoot with a Canon T6 and my indoor pictures have been coming out grainy. Am I doing something wrong? No, Brandy, that's kind of the problem. And so again, if this is a common question, I've answered this many times, and let me go over it again for those of you that are new to the show. Number one, are they really grainy, and how grainy are they? In other words, I see a lot of photographers zoom in at 200% on an image on their monitor and go, oh, look at all that noise. Well, your client or no one else is going to zoom in at 200% of the image, and they're not going to be pixel peeping. They're either going to print it, hopefully, or they're going to look at it at a distance that's going to be reasonable. So noise is not only people that care about noise and grain, quite frankly, are other photographers. We get really geeky about it, and we're, oh, look at the noise. We're talking about specs and ISO and performance, and I shot this on this ISO. Most of the time, 99% of the time, your client will never, ever care. That's not what they're looking for. As I said before, they're looking for emotion. They're looking for a compelling image. They're not looking at noise. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, there's a couple of characteristics. One is not necessarily T6. It has to do with how much light is on that subject. So you still have to have light on a subject. I don't care what camera you're shooting. I don't care what the ISO performance is. It still needs some light. Now, you may be able to get with less light, but then, and I don't want to go into the technical details, but the dynamic range changes, the color changes, everything. So if you're shooting in low light, even without noise, you're still going to not get as sharp a picture, or I should say you're not going to get as quality a picture as if you're shooting in an area with lighting or you're adding your own lighting. So the first thing you should be doing is learning flash photography. Learning flash photography will change your life. It will change your photography forever, I promise you. And you don't have to worry about grain then, because you can bring as much or as little light as you want. And then the second thing is you can go with a faster lens, a lens with a wider aperture, but then your depth of field changes. People go, oh, you need a 50mm 1.8. Well, you can't always shoot at 1.8, because if you're shooting a group indoors, then the person in front's going to be in focus and the person behind is going to be out of focus. So that doesn't work either. So you really do need to learn lighting. That will make a huge difference, and you'll get rid of the grain, because now you can shoot at whatever ISO you want, 100, 200, 400, whatever you decide based on how much light you have with you. So learn flash photography, and that will make a bigger difference in buying a new camera or anything, or a new lens or anything else. That will make a bigger difference in your photography work than anything else, I promise you. All right. Let's see here. So Lamont says, what is the etiquette for taking pictures at a wedding if the couple has hired a photographer? Ooh, this is a tough one, and it's a common one. I see it all the time in that, you know, they hire a photographer, which they should be doing, and then, you know, Uncle Bob shows up with his Hasselblad or some nice camera, probably better than the photographer they hired, because he's a doctor or whatever. He just, you know, got more money, and he's taking pictures with his nice camera. Or, more commonly, is people with this, doing this, and they're like taking pictures, and it drives you nuts if you're doing a wedding and you're hired as a photographer. Number one, they'll stand up right in front of during the ceremony or whatever and block your view. Or number two, the other one that irritates me, and I don't do weddings anymore, but I've seen it done many times. They will stand, they'll see you set up a shot. You'll get the family, you'll get everybody there, and you're going to, okay, do this, you're directing them. And the next thing you know, there's a bunch of people hanging out around you with their phones taking pictures of your setup. And the other problem is, the family doesn't know who to look at. They're distracted. They're like, oh, okay, they're Uncle Bob, Uncle Fred, got a Mary, got a camera. So they're all now, they're not focusing on you. So you have to take control, number one, if you're the photographer. So Lamont, here's my point. Be very, very courteous. If you want, introduce yourself to the photographer. Let them know, hey, look, I'm new. I don't want to get in your way. I don't want to disrupt you in any way. I'm very curious, you know, if you don't mind, I'll stay out of your way. But don't get next to them when they're shooting, or go and invade their setup. If they have something set up and they're in a position, they're going to be photographing, don't come over and start shooting the same setup. Shoot your own stuff the way you want to do it. Shoot stuff they're not shooting, which is really what the family's going to appreciate anyway. Why shoot the same image as the photographer and just have a different angle? Go find interesting images that the photographer's not shooting. If you're a family member, you know the family better than the photographer does. So try and get photos of those people that are not in the spotlight, so to speak. So anyway, it's a big, big problem if you're a wedding photographer. It's very annoying So be very, very courteous, and because someday that could be you, and then you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. So anyway, okay. Let's see. Amanda says, I'm looking for someone to be a mentor, review my images, and provide honest feedback. What do you know? Hey, Amanda, I know a guy that can do that for you. I forgot his name, though. Lee something? No. Listen, I'd love to help you out. That's what I do. That's what I spend most of my time working on. And again, thanks for submitting the question, and this is a good example. This is a place to be. You could join the, again, I'll mention it again, you could join the Facebook group. That's another great place where we mentor people and help, but also you could just reach out, you know, send me a message. I'll work with you. Again, as I said before, I do photo reviews once a month, and so if you want, you can submit your work that way. It's anonymous, as I said before, so you don't have to be embarrassed, which is the whole purpose of doing it. I want everybody to feel, no matter how long you've been shooting, where you're just getting started, these are your first time, I want you to feel like you can still submit your work, any camera, that type of thing. So yeah, that would be one thing. I'd love to work with you. I have a heart for helping new photographers, and I just love to see you successful and get more enjoyment out of photography. Whether you do it as a business or whether you're just doing it for fun as a hobby, doesn't matter to me. You have to measure what the success is. My job, is the way I see it, is just to help you get there based on what you're trying to accomplish. So love to help you out, Amanda. If you want, send me a message, or you could also, as I said before, you could send an email to help@photomentor.tv. Reach out, explain what you're doing, and I will be glad to try and help you the best I can. Okay. All right, so let's see what else we got here. Emma says, any tips on how to make your clients and models comfortable? I'm a naturally awkward person. I'd love to hear how you put people at ease. Okay, this is a great question, Emma, and I'm really glad you asked it, because it's something that I've worked really hard at. And I'll give you the way I do it. I don't know, it may not work for you. You have to develop a style for your own personality. But for me, the first thing I do is, like I said, I just genuinely like people. I find them incredibly interesting, which is why I love to photograph them. So the first thing I do is take a genuine interest. What is it you do? How long you've been doing it? Ask them about themselves. You have a family, whatever it may be. You know, I'll give you a quick example. I was photographing the president of Audi America. So he's a big guy, you know, big, well-known, you know, been around the world. He's a high-profile executive, and so I was hired by the company to photograph him. And so I had this big setup, had 3 people, you know, 2 assistants working with me. But before I did the shoot, I spent a couple weeks doing research on him. I watched every interview, I listened to every interview, I read everything I could find about him, and I knew something about him. And a couple things I found out he was into wine. I found out how he got interested into cars and things like that. So when we're on set, my assistants are setting up, I'm talking to him, and I started asking him some of these things. Oh, I understand you're into wine. Tell me about that, and how'd you got it? All of a sudden, he's like, really? Oh, he just lit up. He changed. His whole demeanor changed. He started talking to me and answering questions. His eyes lit up, and he was all excited about telling me about this wine and how that he collects. And the VPs and the people from Audi that were there with me are going, how did he know this? We didn't even know this about him. And they work with the guy. So it was because I really took an interest in him, and I wanted to know more about him. You know, I felt the more I learned about the individual, the better images I can take. If I know something about them and their personality and what they're like, then maybe I can use that to help and improve my images. So that's the first thing. Take a genuine interest in your subject. Learn about them ahead of time if you can. If not, in front of the camera, ask them about themselves, try and make them, remember, these people are not used to being in front of a camera. They're uncomfortable. So you need to, it's up to you to make them relax, and you want to do that by getting them to forget about the camera, and you do that by talking about them, asking about themselves and things like that. The second thing you can do, if you have any humor at all, which, you know, you guys don't know me that well, unfortunately, and I don't know, people that know me know that I have a pretty wicked sense of humor, and I'm trying to develop it here. It's hard when I'm only talking to this camera, but I'm a jokester, and I'm always kidding people, and so I do that on set. I'm always kidding people, and I'm making fun, and I'm, you know, not mean, of course, and I'm just a jovial, fun person. I just love to crack people up and make jokes, and so that's, for me, that works. It may not work for you, especially if you said you're awkward. The third thing I would tell you is, and it kind of goes back to the first thing. Let's say, for example, here's a good example. You're photographing a family, right? So now this is a little bit stereotypical, but you follow me. So it's a family. Let's say it's a wife, a husband, 2 kids, all right? So I can tell you what's going to happen. The wife's into it. She's probably booked you. She's got it organized. She's probably had hair, makeup done. She's got maybe some new clothes, or she's got all dressed up. She's looking forward to this. This is going to be a really nice family portrait. She's got the kids dressed, and then you got the husband. Okay? Now, most of the time, we don't like to be involved in these kinds of things. So he's going to be a little bit grumpy, and maybe he's not going to want to do it. I'm generalizing here. So, what you might want to do in that case is talk to the wife ahead of time and say, hey, what can you tell me? What can tell me a funny story about your husband, or something that I can use, make him laugh or catch him off guard, something that he wouldn't expect. And if you know something, then you don't use it right away, but you kind of get them photo in a group, you're doing your photos with them. And then maybe while you're let me just get my adjustments, you're making, and then you might look up and go, hey, Bob, I understand you're into yo-yos. Are you a yo-yo champion? I mean, it's like, how do you know I was into yo-yos? So something about, try and throw them off their game a little bit, and then that'll get them to forget about it. Again, it's back to what I was saying before with one of the other questions there about the tripod. If I'm not holding the camera up in front and it's on a tripod and I can engage and talk to them, that also helps because now I'm not hiding behind the camera. The point is, you're in the service business, you're in the people business, you're not in the photography business. I know people think we're in the photography business, but we're not. Our job is not to take pretty pictures. Our job is to make people relax, convey, and get a great image of them, convey an image, and solve a problem. And otherwise, they could just take the picture themselves. If they could buy the same camera you can, why is it they're hiring you? And they're hiring you because you're knowledgeable, you can make them relaxed, and you can hopefully bring something out that will convey something about those people and the person. The third or fourth thing, I forgot now, I think it's the third thing. If I really have a difficult subject, I will bring a bag of props with me. So I have some great goofy things. They could be sunglasses. They could be one of my favorite ones is these paddle balls, with this little rubber ball and the elastic. And the reason is nobody can do those things. They're difficult. So I have a picture. I think it's on my website of 4 women that were involved in raising money for charities and stuff. And so I brought these things because they kind of weren't that relaxed. They didn't want to have their picture taken. And they're doing these things, and they're getting all tangled up, and they're laughing. Totally forgot about me. And I got some really good images out of them because of that. Because they weren't thinking about me. They were just in the moment. And so that's another technique you can use, is some kind of, silly, if you have kids, you can use silly string, whatever you want to do, but something that will get them not thinking about the photograph and instead get them thinking about taking them out of that environment. It goes back to the same thing I was saying before about talking to them, asking them questions and stuff like that. So anyway, Emma, that's a great technique, I think, that may work for you. Again, if you want shoot me an email. I'll be glad to give you some pointers if it's something specific you're working on. I'd love to be able to help you. And so anyway, great questions tonight. Thank you very much, guys. Again, remember, the first Friday of the month, we do the photo reviews. I think I beat this to death here if you didn't know. They're anonymous, and any experience, if you're interested, again, first, I think the next one's April 2nd is when we'll be doing the next one. If you're interested in joining our Facebook group, go ahead and look at photomentor.tv/join and put in your name and information, and we'd love to have you if you're interested in being really learning something and having somebody spend time with you and not just berate you and tell you to read the manual. It's not going to happen in this group. And then lastly is follow me on Facebook or on the social media if you want. And I think you'll find kind of continue some information. I typically will post some things about what's going on in the industry and other tips and things like that that I find going on. So anyway, thanks again. Enjoyed that. I hope you guys enjoyed some of this information. Thanks very much for joining me. And I will see you again, I guess, next Friday.